On June 5, 1989, in the heart of Beijing's Tiananmen Square, an image was captured that would go on to become a lasting symbol of courage, resistance, and the human desire for freedom and democracy. The image of a lone man who, without weapons or power, stood before a line of military tanks and refused to let them pass. His identity and fate were never officially revealed, yet the world remembers him with respect under a single name, Tank Man. A figure who proved that one individual can stand against overwhelming force and represent the voice of millions. But behind this iconic moment lie deeper questions. What were the roots of the Tiananmen Square protests? Why did thousands of students and citizens demand change? And what led the Chinese government to respond with military force and violent suppression? Stay with me as we explore the causes, the crackdown, and the lasting consequences of one of the most significant events in modern history. If you are interested in real historical narratives and the untold stories behind defining moments of our world, please subscribe to the channel and support us by liking this video. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping rose to power in the People's Republic of China and became recognized as the paramount leader, a position that entrusted him with defining the country's overarching policies, guiding the Chinese Communist Party, controlling the military, and maintaining balance within the party ranks. China, at the time, operated under a one-party political system, where the formation of any other group, association, or political party was strictly forbidden, and any criticism against the Communist Party was met with severe punishment. The press and all media outlets were under the party's complete control, while the police and security services closely monitored the actions and behaviors of ordinary citizens, ensuring that even the smallest act of dissent was met with the harshest consequences. This environment of strict control had deep roots, going back to 1966, when Mao Zedong, the founding father of the People's Republic, launched the Cultural Revolution, accusing universities of being infiltrated by Western-influenced elements. He mobilized students and young followers to enforce his ideological line, while professors and intellectuals who resisted were harshly persecuted. Universities were shut down, and new youth groups were formed, composed of students and young activists tasked with advancing Mao's revolutionary agenda. China operated under a rigid communist system in which nearly 80% of the population worked in agriculture, while widespread poverty and high levels of malnutrition shaped everyday life. All farmland was owned by the state, and farmers were required to hand over their entire harvest to the government in exchange for only minimal compensation, a system that removed incentives and kept rural communities in constant hardship. Industry followed the same centralized model, as factories and enterprises were fully owned by the country, which decided what should be produced and where investment should come from, while profit and efficiency were largely ignored. Production focused mainly on coal, steel, and military industries, relying on outdated technology, low productivity, and weak worker motivation, leading to stagnation and economic inefficiency. At the same time, China remained largely isolated from the world, with foreign investment strictly prohibited and the country's economic doors firmly closed, further limiting growth and development. Deng Xiaoping observed the critical and precarious state of China's economy and understood that if conditions continued as they were, the collapse of the Communist Party could happen at any moment. Faced with this reality, he began consulting with his advisors and designing reforms that, surprisingly, went against traditional communist ideals. It was unusual for a communist leader to hold such views. He believed that it was acceptable for some people to become wealthy. Deng famously said, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." What he meant by this was clear. Whether socialist or capitalist in ideology was irrelevant. If a policy could drive economic growth, it should be implemented. Deng Xiaoping launched a series of bold reforms that fundamentally changed China's economy. Previously, farmers were required to hand over all their agricultural output to the state, but under the new system, they only delivered a fixed portion, while being allowed to sell the surplus freely on the open market. Limited freedoms were also granted to industry, giving factory managers the authority to decide what to produce and which goods were more profitable. For the first time, managers became responsible for profits and losses, not just for following state orders. At the same time, Deng made another revolutionary decision by allowing foreign investment and opening China's doors to the world. This shift came at a crucial moment as the United States, seeking to distance China from the Soviet Union, channeled significant investment into the country. However, in the political sphere, he continued a policy of repression and fear, believing deeply that progress could only occur within a framework of stability, and that such stability required the use of power and control. At the same time, Deng Xiaoping regarded Mao's Cultural Revolution as a historical disaster. For this reason, he took a significant step by reopening universities and establishing new educational institutions. These reforms became known as Chinese-style socialism. Under this system, the political structure remained closed, with a single ruling party and strict repression of the population. At the same time, the economic system was opened up, allowing foreign investment and granting people greater economic freedom. However, implementing these policies was far from easy. The Communist Party was largely dominated by conservatives who were committed to preserving the achievements of the revolution and pursuing a fully communist society. To push reforms forward, Deng empowered figures with reformist ideas. As a result, Hu Yaobang, a reform-minded leader, was appointed General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party in 1980. This shift led to the emergence of two opposing camps within the party: reformists versus conservatives. Years passed, and the results of Deng Xiaoping's reforms became evident. Both industry and agriculture in China experienced remarkable growth. However, new problems soon emerged. The influx of foreign capital and investment from Western countries led to the rise of extreme wealth for some, while many others remained in poverty. Income inequality skyrocketed, and the gap between urban and rural areas widened dramatically, fueling mass migration from villages to cities. At the same time, runaway inflation caused prices to soar day by day. The large amounts of new capital also contributed to rampant corruption among members of the Chinese Communist Party, and as news of this corruption spread, public anger grew. Universities had reopened, and critical discussions about party policies began to flourish. Gradually, the number of reformist-minded professors and students increased. Many students believed that the press was heavily censored, leaving them no legal outlet to voice their grievances. The collapse of communist governments across Eastern Europe emboldened these young activists even further. Hu Yaobang, known for his opposition to Maoist hardliners, emerged as a leader of this reformist movement. However, under pressure from Conservative Party members, he was removed from his position as General Secretary of the CCP in 1987. A spark was ignited in China in 1989. Hu Yaobang, the country's hope for reform, passed away from a heart attack, though rumors spread that he had been assassinated. Students gathered in Tiananmen Square to mourn him, chanting slogans against corruption and in support of reform. These protests continued to grow. In the following week, students drafted petitions demanding direct dialogue with government officials, which the government refused to grant. By the third week, under the leadership of Li Peng, the Chinese government labeled the protests as a riot and called for their suppression. By the fourth week, ordinary citizens, workers, and office employees joined the demonstrations, swelling the number of protesters. Beginning on May 13th, students launched a hunger strike, capturing the attention of domestic and international media. In the fifth week, some Reformist Party members joined the protests. The government declared martial law and handed control of the situation to the military. By the sixth week, the army entered the outskirts of Beijing for the first time, but civilians stood in front of the tanks, blocking their advance. Commanders and soldiers, fearing the fate of the Soviet Union, hesitated to use force. However, in the seventh week, Deng Xiaoping personally intervened, authorizing the army to fire directly on protesters. Tanks re-entered the outskirts of the city, and demonstrators once again tried to block their path. This time, the situation turned tragic. Tanks and machine guns were used against the protesters, and the military pushed all the way to Tiananmen Square. Facing the overwhelming firepower, civilians fled to save their lives, and the square was taken by the army. The Chinese government has always attempted to suppress information about casualties, censoring any news coverage. Estimates suggest that 3,000 to 7,000 people were injured, and roughly 1,000 to 2,000 were killed during the crackdown. Thank you all for joining me in this podcast. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment, as it greatly helps the growth of the channel. See you in the next video. Goodbye.